What if you could win a war without ever fighting a battle? What if the most powerful weapon was not a sword, but the mind of your enemy? For over 2,000 years, there has been a small, enigmatic book that generals and CEOs alike have turned to for answers: The Art of War. But to understand this book, we must first understand the world that created it. Let us return to the spring and autumn period, one of the darkest and most chaotic eras in history. The Zhou dynasty, once the son of heaven, was now a mere shadow of its former self. Hundreds of vassal states, large and small, rose up, tearing each other like a pack of starving wolves. With each passing day, a city could be erased. With each falling night, a bloodline could be extinguished. In such a world, trust was a luxury. Treaties were written only to be torn. Alliances were formed only to be betrayed. This was not an age of glorious battles, but an age of ruthless conspiracies and stabs in the back. It was in this crucible of chaos and strategy that the need for a system of strategic thought that could deliver absolute victory, a system that could see into the very soul of the enemy, became more urgent than ever. And the author of that system, Sun Tzu, who was he? This is the first and greatest mystery. For centuries, historians have argued fiercely. Some say he never existed, that Sun Tzu was just a name given to a school of strategic thought compiled by many over time. He was just a ghost, a legend. In the historical records, we have only one detailed story about him, a story that is both terrifying and reveals everything about this man's philosophy. It was the day Sun Tzu had his audience with King Helu of Wu. After reading his 13 chapters on warfare, the king, half in belief and half in doubt, asked a challenging question. Your principles are brilliant, but can they be applied to women? Sun Tzu replied, yes. The king then summoned 180 of his beautiful concubines, and the test began. Sun Tzu divided them into 2 companies, appointing the king's 2 favorite concubines as their commanders. He gave each a halberd, then explained the orders clearly. When I beat the drum, you must all follow the signals. 1 beat means look to my chest. A beat to the left means turn left. To the right means turn right. And a beat to the rear means turn around. But when the first drum signal sounded, the concubines did not move. Instead, they looked at each other and giggled. Sun Tzu was unfazed. He said calmly, if the signals are not clear, it is the fault of the general. He patiently explained the rules once more, then beat the drum for the 2nd time. This time, the concubines laughed even louder. And that is when the atmosphere in the palace changed. Sun Tzu's face turned to stone. He said, if the signals are clear and the soldiers still disobey, it is the fault of their officers. He turned to the royal guard and gave an order that horrified everyone. Take the 2 commanders and execute them. The king, watching from his high platform, was aghast. He rushed a messenger out to stop the execution. I am now satisfied with your ability to handle troops. Without these 2 concubines, my food would lose its flavor. Please spare them. Sun Tzu turned, looked the messenger in the eye, and replied with a line that would go down in history. I have already received my commission as general. While a general is in command of the army, there are some commands of the sovereign he is unable to accept. The 2 favorite concubines were executed on the spot. The remaining women, their faces pale with fear, did not dare to utter a sound. Sun Tzu appointed 2 others as commanders and continued the drill. This time, when the drum sounded, every single movement, from turning left and right to advancing, retreating, kneeling, and standing, was performed in perfect, silent, absolute precision. Sun Tzu turned to the king and said, "Your Majesty, the troops are now properly trained. You can now use them for anything you wish, even to march through fire and water." This story is the only clue to the man Sun Tzu, but the debate about his existence continued until one day in April 1972, at a place called Yinkuishan, construction workers accidentally unearthed an ancient Han Dynasty tomb. Inside, they found a treasure more precious than gold: thousands of perfectly preserved bamboo slips. This shocking discovery provided undeniable proof. It contained not only parts of the art of war we know, but also lost chapters, proving that this book has existed for a very long time, and that Sun Tzu, or at least his school of thought, was absolutely real. The mystery of this man has perhaps been solved, but the mystery of his mind, our investigations, is just beginning. Today, we will open 3 case files on the greatest secrets in this art of war. 3 strategic groups that have completely changed how we see conflict, power, and human nature itself. Case file number 1. The Battle in the Shadows. Sun Tzu book is filled with dozens of principles, but one stands above all others as the pinnacle of strategic thought. It is the first principle we must investigate. To win 100 victories in 100 battles, Sun Tzu wrote, is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting, that is the true acme of skill. This is the highest level of warfare, a war of psychology and intelligence. And perhaps no example illustrates this better than the 20-year revenge of King Gujian of Yu. After being defeated in the Battle of Kuaiji, Gujian was captured and forced to serve as a slave to King Fuchai of Wu. He endured every humiliation, even tasting Fuchai's store to prove his loyalty. But behind the face of a submissive slave, a ruthless plan to revenge was taking shape. When he was finally allowed to return to his own kingdom, Gujian began his campaign. He hung a bitter gallbladder by his bed, tasting it every day so he would never forget his shame. But patience was not his only weapon. His main weapon was a 2-decade-long campaign of intelligence and psychological warfare, orchestrated by his 2 great ministers, Wenzhong and Fan Li. First, they attacked Fuchai's spirit. They presented him with rare, exquisite wood to encourage him to buy grandiose palaces, draining the Wu state's treasury. Most importantly, they found and presented Fuchai with a peerless beauty, Cixi. Her beauty captivated Fuchai, causing him to neglect state affairs, spending his days and nights in lavish banquets. Cixi was not just a beauty, she was the highest level of spy. Next, they attacked Wu's economy. They spread news that they were buying grain seed from Wu at an astronomical price. The peasants of Wu, seeing the profit, sold all their grain seed. Then the state of Yu boiled the seeds they had bought and sold them back to Wu. Wu, unaware, planted dead seeds, leading to a devastating famine. Finally, they attacked the royal court itself. They used gold and jewels to bribe corrupt officials, especially Bo Pai, to constantly slander the loyal words of Wu Zixu, the only one who saw through Yu's plot. In the end, Fu Chai gave Wu Zixu a sword, forcing him to commit suicide. With that, the state of Wu had lost its last pillar of strength. After 20 years, when Wu was rotten from the inside, its army exhausted, its treasury empty, and its people resentful, only then did Goujian dispatch his army. The state of Wu collapsed swiftly. Goujian had won, not on a battlefield, but in a silent, 2-decade-long campaign. He had subdued his enemy without losing an arrow, without shredding a drop of blood. That is the power of understanding and attacking the invisible weaknesses of your enemy. But what happens when war is unavoidable and you are forced to face a powerful enemy on the field? Case file number 2. The theater of deception. When direct conflict is inevitable, Sun Tzu principles shift from silent infiltration to active misdirection. He instructs, all warfare is based on deception. This is not mere lying. This is the blueprint for constructing an alternate reality for your enemy. And no director was more brilliant at staging this play than Sun Bin, a descendant of Sun Tzu, in his 2 classic performances that sealed the fate of his arch-nemesis, Pang Zhuan. This is an art form, a play where you are the director, and the battlefield is your stage. Your enemy is not the audience. They are the lead actor, without ever knowing it. The first play was called Besiege Wei to Rescue Zhao. At that time, Pang Zhuan was leading the elite army of Wei to lay siege to the capital of Zhao. The situation was critical. The state of Qi sent Sun Bin to the rescue. Instead of leading his army directly to the siege to confront Pang Zhuan's powerful force head-on, Sun Bin did the opposite. He said, to entangle a knot, one must not grasp it and pull. To mediate a fight, one must not jump in and brawl. We should avoid the strong and strike at the weak. And Pang Zhuan's weakness at this moment was the capital of Wei itself, left undefended as all elite troops has been dispatched. Sun Bin ordered his army to attack the Wei capital directly. Pang Zhuan, who had the upper hand in Zhao, heard that his home was under attack and was forced to abandon the prize before him, rushing his army back to save it. Sun Bin had already set up an ambush, dealing the Wei army a devastating blow. The state of Zhao was safe without the Qi army ever having to fight the enemy's main force. A few years later, the 2 rivals met again. This time, Pang Zhuan was attacking the state of Han. Sun Bin was again sent to help. This is when the second and final act of Pang Zhuan began. The play was called Reducing the Stuffs to Feign Retreat. Knowing Pang Zhuan still held a grudge and believed the Qi army to be cowardly, Sun Bin decided to use that very arrogance as the weapon to kill him. When the Qi army entered Wei territory, Sun Bin ordered, on the first day, the entire army will light 100,000 cooking stoves. On the second day, he ordered them to light only 50,000 stoves. On the third day, only 20,000. Pang Zhuan, who had been tracking them, saw the number of cooking fires decrease each day and slapped his thigh in delight, exclaiming, I knew it! The soldiers of Qi are cowards. After only 3 days in our territory, more than half of them have deserted. Arrogance had completely blighted his reason. Pang Zhuan abandoned his infantry and heavy supply wagons, leading only his most elite cavalry in a relentless, day and night pursuit, hoping to capture Sun Bin. But he did not know that Sun Bin had calculated his exact speed and had set a deadly trap in a narrow pass called Maling. When Pang Zhuan arrived at night, he ordered a torch to be lit to read the arriving carved on a tree. The moment the flame flared up, tens of thousands of arrows rained down from the darkness. Pang Zhuan, knowing he was trapped, took his own sword and ended his life. Sun Bin won by painting a false picture and forcing his enemy to live in it until the very end. Both stories are perfect examples of how Sun Tzu viewed the battlefield as a stage. The winner is not the one with the stronger actors, but the director who controls the script. But what if your enemy is not arrogant, not reckless? How do you create a victory from nothing? Case file number 3. The Power of the Mountain. Sun Tzu wrote, "A clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him. He achieves this by creating Shi. Shi is a powerful concept. It is potential energy, a momentum created by circumstance and terrain. Great generals don't just fight in the circumstances. They scout the circumstances to create Shi. Imagine you are trying to push a giant boulder on flat ground. You will exhaust yourself. Now, imagine that same boulder, but it is perched on the top of a high, steep mountain. You only need to give it a slight nudge. The force that follows is no longer yours. It is the force of the mountain, of gravity, of circumstance itself. That is Shi, one of Sun Tzu's most critical concepts. It is potential energy, momentum, a strategic advantage created from circumstance. A great general does not ask, "How can my soldiers be stronger?" He asks, "How can I put them in a position where they cannot fail to win?" And sometimes that position is the most dangerous place of all. The god of war, Han Xin, proved this in the Battle of Jingxing. At the time, with only a few tens of thousands of troops, he had to face the 200,000 strong army of the Zhao state. He did something no one could imagine. He ordered his army to arrange themselves for battle with their backs to the river. This was a fatal taboo in military strategy, a suicidal move. The Zhao generals laughed and charged with their full force, thinking victory was certain. But they did not expect that soldiers placed on death ground, with no escape, would fight with the strength of desperation. In the meantime, a detachment of Han Xin's cavalry circled around and captured the now empty Zhao camp. When the Zhao army saw their own camp had fallen, their morale collapsed completely and they were annihilated. Han Xin did not create momentum from a mountain. He created from human desperation. This concept of Shi also explains one of the greatest mistakes in history. At the Battle of Red Cliffs, Cao Cao had a mighty army, but they were northerners, unused to naval warfare. To solve the problem of seasickness, he ordered his large warships to be chained together, creating a stable, floating city. He solved a small problem, but in doing so, he created a colossal weak point, a fatal disadvantage, Shi. His fleet, though stable, became clumsy, slow, and most importantly, it had turned into a giant tinderbox. The Sun Liu alliance saw that weakness, and all they needed was an east wind to turn Cao Cao's numerical advantage into his own grave. Even the seemingly undisciplined nomadic armies were master of creating Shi. Genghis Khan's Mongol horsemen were famous for their feigned retreat tactic. They would charge briefly and then suddenly flee in disarray. These heavy, disciplined European armies would think they had won and give chase. But that was the trap. The pursuit would stretch their formations, create chaos, and pull them away from their strong defensive positions. Once the enemy was lured into unfavorable terrain, the Mongol cavalry would suddenly turn back, like a flash flood, surrounding and destroy them unit by unit. They had turned their enemy's arrogance and impatience into their greatest ally. All three stories prove a true ally by Sun Tzu. The victor is not the one with the strongest army, but the one who creates a situation in which he cannot lose. In the end, who was Sun Tzu? Perhaps we will never truly know. But his legacy is not in his name, but in the timeless pages of his book. The Art of War teaches us a terrifying but hopeful truth. The greatest battlefield is not out there, but within the human mind. His lessons are not just about warfare, but about how to gain the upper hand in any battle of wits. He shows us that true power comes not from shouting the loudest or hitting the hardest, but from understanding the deepest. Understanding your opponent, understanding your circumstances, and most critically, understanding yourself. So, in your own life, what is the dead ground you are facing? A place where, if you fight with all your might, you might create an unexpected path to survival. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining me in the alley today. Don't forget to subscribe so we can explore more mysteries and legends together. Bye.